Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, August 2nd, 2024. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And it is Old Home Week because back again after, basically being the inspiration for this podcast, the producer of this podcast, a daily presence on this podcast for 4 years, back with us, National Review's Noah Rothman. Hi, Noah.
Hi, John.
So excited to have you. Noah and I texting this morning, and then I thought, my goodness, we need to have Noah on to talk about everything that is happening. And so we're going to just jump right in. And I'm going to ask you guys very plainly, 11:30 last night, Joint Force Andrews Base, the prisoner swap, American hostages come off the plane. And this is being treated and greeted as a gigantic diplomatic victory for the Biden administration, as expressed by Kamala Harris on the runway. Very happy scenes of Evan Gershkovich meeting his family, all of that. And obviously a very complicated negotiation involving several nations and 17 people and so there seems to be a desire on the part of people alarmed by the rise of Kamala Harris and by the onrush of enthusiasm in the Democratic Party to be slightly turdish in the punch bowl and say, whoa, wait a minute about this. Are we really supposed to be celebrating this event because Putin got himself back some murderers and killers and people who were legitimately convicted and charged in these other countries and placed in prison under the laws of these countries, and therefore we used American power to leverage them out to get them back, which seems to be a reward for Putin. Is that a turd in the punch bowl thing, or is this a really legitimate kind of argument about what on earth has happened here? No, where are you on this?
I think it's a perfectly legitimate argument, and it's one that we've been making for years. This deal seems to be very similar to the one that the Biden administration crafted for Brittney Griner, a WNBA player who was traded for one of the world's most notorious arms dealers and a convicted hitman, both of whom were convicted either of killing Westerners or conspiring to kill Westerners. And this deal seems similar. I don't want to say it was completely 100% lopsided in Moscow's direction. The West probably got a couple of spies back too. But for the most part, we got Russian dissidents, political prisoners, and Americans who are held captive for this very profitable enterprise of trading them for strategic and tactical assets in Moscow's ongoing campaign to destabilize the West. People who are convicted of insider trading schemes with links to the Russian government, for hackers and spies and arms dealers and criminals, and all of them are assets in the Kremlin's campaign against the West. So it is a lopsided deal, and people who are throwing brushback pitches at anybody who notices it are revealing how uncomfortable they are with these circumstances. It's not an unalloyed victory. It is perhaps a geld that must be paid to hostage takers, but any rational thinking person must temper the ebullience they feel legitimately for the return of these people who were persecuted and treated miserably, with the fact that it is a sacrifice of America's national interests abroad. No question about it.
Seth, where you with Noah on this?
It always depends who the people are, but yeah. It's interesting because it was America's idea to open this up beyond a one-to-one swap, which is, generally speaking, the last thing that you want to do. I mean, we've talked about how that was when Israel started its prisoner swaps. It also wanted either one-to-one or one war to one war, meaning everybody we captured during this period of conflict return for everybody you captured this period of conflict, and that would force these terror groups to play by state rules. But the Americans this time were the ones who said maybe we should broaden it, maybe we should widen it. So I think in the future, probably the biggest thing to come out of this to affect future deals is that with regimes like this, you can't really go back. Once you cross a line like that, they know that's on offer. So my concern is not just the people that are getting back. I mean, last time Victor Butt was the merchant of death in the Brittany Griner trade, and considering Russia's little green men all over the globe, having an arms dealer like that with those connections and abilities is obviously a very dangerous thing. But it's probably more dangerous this time for the Americans to have opened it up beyond 1-to-1 and sort of now open the door to this looking like the kind of prisoner swaps that other countries do, including Israel. There won't be 1,000 prisoners for one Russia. I mean, the situations are different, but that I think is the biggest thing going forward.
I think so. I of course I agree with Noah that yes, this is basically a case in which the parties played their expected roles in an understood transaction that was carried out as a direct result of the intention to take prisoners to do this, and it's not like a miracle, interceded here. It's a game, and we just played our role in the game. We're thrilled to have him back. What bothers me is the larger context of U.S.-Russia foreign policy, which is that it would be one thing if we were sort of had Putin on the ropes elsewhere and were pressuring him and were, driving him into a corner, but we're standing down, particularly in Ukraine and all sorts of areas, and being weak. And so this is just another step on his path to getting what he wants. It's not like it's not like we're now just giving him a sort of one-off. He could take this while we demolish him elsewhere.
I mean, I think the thing of the story here is that the prize for Putin and Russia was a convicted murderer in Germany who was sent to Germany to assassinate a Chechen. And this guy was in Putin's Praetorian Guard. And so in the axis of evil sense, or in the evil sense, Putin was given the thing that he most wanted, not sort of having it impressed upon him that, he might want to do something or other, it was like, okay, you get your prize of choice, so we can get back these Americans that you railroaded and that have taken clearly for the purpose of getting what you're getting right now. So in that sense, we are the losers in this negotiation, not the winners in this negotiation. In the classic spy swap of the Cold War, we had a spy, they had a spy. We were the good guys, they were the bad guys, so their spy was worse than our spy, if you're not John le Carré and think all spies are the same. So we did what we had to do to get our spies back, including give them back a spy that we had taken. But that was a 1-for-1, though. That was a tit for tat. We have a completely innocent reporter over here that you have basically, kidnapped and thrown in jail, and a businessman whom you say is a spy, whom you kidnapped and threw in jail. And we're going to let you analogize them and equalize them with an assassin. Like, I don't know about that. That's where it starts getting uncomfortably like an Israeli prisoner swap, where you get Israel desperately wanting Gilad Shalit so badly, having been kidnapped into Gaza, held for 5 years, that you end up trading him for more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. And 13 years later, one of those prisoners organizes the October 7th massacre. And who was the negotiator? who was the negotiator of that Gilad Shalit prisoner swap on the Hamas side. Khalid Mashal, who has now been named the successor to Ismail Haniyeh, the political head of Hamas, who was assassinated in Tehran on Wednesday. So everything old is new again. These people resurface. They come back. Clearly, Krasikov, the assassin Putin wants, I assume he doesn't want him just to go sit in a dacha and, and drink and eat blini. He's going to want him back in the field killing whoever he needs to get killed. And so we have contributed to that here. And so, yes, we should celebrate the release of an American, but no, the idea, which was being retailed all day yesterday, that Biden and Sullivan and had pulled off this remarkable diplomatic triumph. Like, what did Kamala Harris say on the runway? She said, "This is evidence of the success of diplomacy." Diplomacy,
this is proof of what happened, the understanding of the importance of the cruciality of
diplomacy-ness of diplomatic presidential,
all of which Biden understands, and that which is understood.
So let's talk about that
and significance. But I think one of the other things I would say about the swap, by the way, is that when we're talking about tempting Russia into thinking that it can do this or more at a future time, I think this is a case of that having already happened. I think we're here because of that. I mean, according to the timeline, the U.S. said, let's broaden it beyond the one-to-one. We're talking to the Russians. The U.S. came to the Russians and said, we want Paul Whelan and we'll give you these Slovakians or whoever, whatever it was, maybe that was before them. They had something to trade. And the Russians said, okay, well, no. But it was clear that both sides were clear that the other side was at least willing to talk. At some point after that, then the U.S. went back and said, all right, well, let's see, maybe we should add more people and it shouldn't be just one-to-one. And then the Russians took Gershkovich, arrested him. So I think there's an argument to be made that the administration approached Russia about a deal, asked them what they wanted. The Russians got a clear view of what the U.S. was willing to give up and understood that all they had to do was arrest another American, somebody in a prominent position, and put him on trial. And there you have your trade. So
that's a very, very interesting analysis, and we'll get more clarity on the degree to which what you have just laid out there is in fact, that we handed Russia the perverse incentive to arrest Evan Gershkovich because we had this overly ambitious agenda for a massive hostage swap. And we were told, by the way, yesterday by JL, this took years. What does that mean? Like a negotiation. Now, it took years to get Gilad Shalit out. You know how that happened? Israel said 40 prisoners and Hamas said no. And then Israel said 80 prisoners and Hamas said no. And eventually it got to 1,029 prisoners and Hamas said yes. And then Gilad Shalit was released. Noah, you were
I was just going to say that you touched on the domestic reaction to this event yesterday, which I thought was really illustrative and kind of an ominous portent for Democrats. Because this miasma of ebullience, of inevitable success has transferred from Republicans to Democrats with real whipsaw effect. And they have no tolerance for nuance here, right? They're rejecting everything that we have said about, you have to temper your enthusiasm for this thing with what we had to give up, what have you. But Joe Biden clearly believes he deserves a victory lap. He was out there right away in the White House, surrounded by family. He made plans to head out into the tarmac, where he just sort of stood there, mouth agape, and wandered around and wandered onto the fuselage and walked around a little bit, maybe thanked the pilots, maybe not. Who knows? He just kind of meanders. But he wants to be in the spotlight. And that confirms what I think what Fox News has reported, which is that the president is planning this gratuitously adulatory world tour to send him off. He's going to get this very lavish send off at the DNC on day one. It's this ice flow. That should be the end of that. But it's not going to be. He wants to go to the G20 summit and APEC in South America in November. He wants to go, this is according to Fox News, he wants to go to Europe. He wants to go to Africa. He wants to go to the Middle East to celebrate all his accomplishments. He wants to be out there because he is, according to the Associated Press, quote, full of bitterness and regret. And it seems quite obvious that he is really resentful of the circumstances to which his party consigned him. And he doesn't want to just simply accept that. He wants to be on the stage. He thinks he deserves to be on that stage. And Democrats are just not reckoning with the fact that this really unpopular millstone around their neck is just not going to go away until they slough him off with some active agency. And you know, the idea that you can just pivot off the Biden era to the Kamala era is going to be complicated by the president's clear resentment of his conditions.
Okay, I got one for you. I got one way in which he's shuffled off the stage, whether he wants to be or not, and that is Hunter's trial in September.
I had forgotten about that.
His son is going on trial for felonies in September. The special prosecutor in that case, who came under essentially slanderous attack by Hunter's lawyers in a way that doubly angered David Weiss, which is probably not the wisest thing to do, has now fought to secure a writ of immunity for Hallie Biden, the widow of Beau and the person that Hunter got crack addicted, in order to ask. We don't know what questions he wants to ask her, but if he's seeking to compel a writ of immunity so that she has no way of taking the fifth in the courtroom, there must be more there than meets the eye than we heard in her testimony in the first case that he was convicted for. And I don't know how Biden isn't forced to lay low during the 3 or 4 weeks of that trial, which start in mid-September, unless they can get it postponed. So there is that. The other possibility is you're looking at this in the wrong way. They're putting him on night one at the convention because that's the ice flow.
Oh,
he's gone, right?
No.
He's gone after. But you're saying he's going to get himself back in the conversation.
Well, I don't know if I can believe it or not. This is what they're floating to Fox News, and they clearly want that to take hold, and they want Democrats to concede to his obviously ego-driven desire here to have this big prolonged goodbye. I put my reputation on the line saying I don't think this president makes it to January. I wrote it down. I said it on the editor's podcast, just because these circumstances are untenable politically and just in terms of good governance. He is unequipped to do the job. And we could get a very ugly reminder of that if the knife's edge situation in the Middle East reaches a tipping point, which would be very sobering.
The swap story was also an example, right? Because
this is another point.
There was a thing told last night, which was part of the story, which is that the Germans sent somebody with a message to Biden. And they were on a hello rope line, and they had 2 seconds for a handshake. And she was bringing a message saying, you need to call Olaf Scholz and whatever. And that was it. That was the whole message. And she shook Biden's hand. Biden said, you got to call Scholz, Mr. President. And he said, oh, we already made that call. And then Tony Blinken sort of mumbled, so it said quietly, we'll make that call. Then we'll make the call. And then Joe Biden said, yeah, I promise. And then they made the call. And then 2 months later, they had an agreement with Scholz's office to push forward on what they needed. They had in writing whatever Scholz needed in writing. So there have been times when some of these projects have really hung in the balance, and Biden has all but botched it. Except he has handlers there who are listening to his conversations and are switching answers to, a German representative from no to yes.
This is the thing about the miasma. There was this collective reaction among reporters on Twitter to this Wall Street Journal anecdote, in the Wall Street Journal report that was Joe Biden, while he's recovering from COVID, made a call to the Slovenian prime minister to get this deal done. And people were like, wow, he's still working. Isn't it amazing? No, it ain't. He's the president of the United States. He can't just disappear on you. This is the sort of stuff that the president has to get done. And then you had the White House political director from her private Twitter account, which I just happened to stumble across, Emmy Ruiz, who was very bitter, was like, according to very senior aides on deep background, Joe Biden is still working around the clock and delivering for the American people, which suggests a lot of people were very surprised to hear Joe Biden is still engaged in the job of being the president of the United States, which precludes sick days, which precludes taking prolonged vacations. And the expectations are set. Well, they're okay, we have such low expectations for Joe Biden. He can just coast at this point. He cannot.
Well, so no, okay, he can't. He will. He is. This is where he is. And I think, as we say, we are potentially on the verge of a calamitous escalation in the Middle East. And what we don't know are about 15 different things. So maybe we should go through what we don't know. Iran has flown the red flag of revenge. It says it will strike at Israel. Iran has multiple ways to strike at Israel. It can use the Houthis, who have now shown that they can fly a drone into Tel Aviv, although a bunch of other drones that were flown at the same time were shot down. So it may have been a lucky break that they got that one in. They've got Hezbollah has precision guided munitions that it has yet to use against Israel. 5 minutes to the Azrieli Tower, the tallest building in Tel Aviv, from the Lebanese border, with a precision guided munition, almost impossible to defend against if it flies low enough. It can evade the Israeli air defenses because it is precision guided. Iran's own cache. Whatever Hamas might be able to pull off that it's held in reserve, right? It has all these different possibilities. In July or whatever that was, I can't now remember when it was. April, excuse me. The 300 missile strike fired at Israel that the 7 nations under the helpful participation of the Biden administration made negatory, right? Like basically negated the effect of the Iranian firing. Biden signaling that he's mad at Israel last night by saying that it was not helpful that Israel assassinated Ismail Haniyeh in Iran would suggest that, to the extent that Biden is a decision maker here, that he might not be looking with favor on the idea of playing another activist role in shooting down.
To be fair, Lloyd Austin has confirmed we will do that again in those words.
Okay. All right. So, you know what? I'm being unfair. I didn't know that Austin said that. But what we do know is that we got a British foreign minister now who is basically fundamentally anti-Israel and will not, I don't think he may be the defense minister. Who knows who makes the decisions there? Starmer would probably be the decision maker. But we know that Britain is now run by a different regime that is more hostile to Israel, and I don't know. We don't know what the hell is going to happen, and Israelis are scared, and municipalities in Israel are issuing terrifying documents to Israelis about how to batten down the hatches for a long siege, involving how much water you need to stock up and where to bring your passports and your documents and how much toilet paper to have and how to secure your safe room. I mean, this is not what Israelis are usually told in these circumstances. Is if you hear the siren, go into the hallway, go get away from glass, because there's going to be a Hamas, maybe something will hit and glass will shatter. So if you stand in your stairwell, you're not going to get hit by flying glass. This is way more serious than that. Nobody knows what to expect. And we have this non compos mentis president. Not good, Bob.
Not just the non compos mentis president, but we have a sort of semi already installed successor who, while not non compos mentis, is also incapable of giving statements for other reasons. So there's no communication from the actual head of our government or the sort of
The actual head of our government.
or the actual head of our government, right?
I'm
Yes.
going to say there's a universe of subtext and for other reasons.
Right.
I mean, in other words, between the two of them, they don't even make up one president here.
Okay, so this is a time of testing, obviously, for Kamala Harris. I don't care what you say. I don't care how much the meter in the tank for her and all of that. She's in an unprecedented situation, and unprecedented situations lead to unprecedented situations. And having to be the sitting vice president and future nominee of the party in a time of crisis, you know who that wasn't good for? Not that I want to analogize things, because like analogies aren't going to really work well in this situation. Hubert Humphrey. Wasn't good for Hubert Humphrey that he was vice president and running for president in 1968 with Lyndon Johnson as president, with all the kind of things that were going on in Vietnam, and Richard Nixon saying, you know what, I got a secret plan to end this war. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Not telling you. Can't tell you, because that would signal to the North Vietnamese what I'm coming with, and we're not going to do that. And there's Humphrey. He can't separate himself from Vietnam. He can't direct Vietnam. He can't do anything except sit there while the country melts down over Vietnam. And if there is a major crisis in the Middle East, what she does have, of course, is this PR machine that now encompasses the entirety of the American mass media outside the explicitly conservative media. Right? I mean, it is astounding to see.
There is a sense of despair washing over. I listened to my colleague, Charles Cook, on the Editor's Podcast yesterday, who was pretty crestfallen, I think it's fair to say, over the extent to which the press has committed itself to this campaign, because they have something to prove, not of course to the readers who they've let down repeatedly over the years, but to their political allies who they disappointed by failing to execute the prop up Joe Biden mission properly. But there is evidence of how this cycle breaks down for the press. You know, it begins with just sort of ignoring the problem, which is clearly a vulnerability for Democrats, and then progressives get mad because it doesn't necessarily work, so they double down, or they suggest that it's all a hoax perpetrated by evil conservatives. And then when it breaks through, they play the victim as though we couldn't possibly have known how this, would unfold. We were in the dark too, just like you. And that happened with the border crisis. That happened with Hunter Biden's scandal, not necessarily the laptop, but the scandal broadly. And it happened with Joe Biden's age. The problem is it takes years to break through. And then the press isn't in control of it, because it breaks through in the absence of their ability to guide and marshal the narrative. So they don't have time on their hands, but everything is so sped up. Since June 27th, everything has been so sped up that you have to think that cycle accelerates as well.
Okay, well, here's my fear, speaking here as a frankly, Zionist, pro-Israel person on a Zionist, pro-Israel podcast. We don't know what her responses to the things that we're talking about are going to be, but we also don't know what will qualify as something considered a crisis that her slavish supporters in the press will not deem her to be handling well or badly. By which I mean her bias is toward the idea that Israel is a problematic actor. The liberal media bias is toward the idea that Israel is a problematic international actor. Israel is maybe about to come under terrible assault, after which it will be compelled to respond with overwhelming force, to the extent that it has overwhelming force to respond. Who gets blamed for what? And if she blames Israel for escalation, or tries to kind of square the circle and say, we need to bring this all down and calm things down because this isn't helping anybody, that stuff. Who's going to make the case that she failed if, in our view, her response is a moral, political, tactical, strategic, military failure? They're not going to. Question is what the American people are going to think of her behavior. But we are now in this question of, is the mediation of the press more powerful than we realize. Like, are they going to be able to shield her from the consequences of the things that she says and does, when the things she says and does actually are going to have moment and bite and teeth? That hasn't happened yet. Nothing that she has said or done is of any consequence. We're just having a personality elevation. Basically, this is like the Beatles before they came to New York, like a 2-month campaign to gin up excitement beyond belief, so that by the time they show up on the Ed Sullivan Show, the entire country is in a state of near hysteria. But even before the convention starts, she could find herself in a world of trouble, having to navigate a world of trouble, and then we'll see whether or not that this can punch through. Now, maybe she'll be good. I mean, I doubt it, but I mean, maybe she'll do better than we thought. Maybe she's a better actor than we thought she was. Maybe if she's running this campaign, or as part of this campaign as efficiently as she's been so far, maybe there's more life in the old gal yet. But I
think the dam breaks easily with the media. It takes somebody jumping into the sea for it to part. That's how the media works with these things, right? And so I think
it's the famous Nachshon analogy.
Yes. We need, who is Nachshon ben Aminadab in this scenario?
Yeah.
Maybe
Nachshon, by the way, is the guy in the Exodus story who is willing to jump in to the Sea of Reeds that God then parts and makes. He's the one who is willing to accept that God will intervene and makes the first move. So the original
leap of faith.
Yes, exactly.
An actual literal leap of faith.
Yes.
So, but I think it breaks quickly after that. And I don't know, it's very much like the old Soviet joke, nobody wants to be the first one to stop clapping. You never want to be the first to stop clapping. Kamala has been introduced and the press is giving her a standing ovation. No reporter seems to want to be the first to stop clapping and ask her a question or, nudge her a bit and say, it's been 2 weeks. Can we ask you a question or something like that?
Yeah.
And so I think that at some point, something like that is going to happen. And I think that the dam will break fairly quickly because the media tends to move in these sort of pack environments. And when somebody asks her a question and says, you need to talk to us, they are going to start a conversation about how, they're doing journalism. Look at them. They're challenging. That's the headlines there. And so everybody else will jump in and go, oh, well, I want an interview too. If you're going to start doing interviews, I want an interview too. Somebody has to break the glass.
I just want to remind you of a story I told last week from 1984, because this happened in 1984 and it's operative today, 40 years later. Walter Mondale names Geraldine Ferraro as his running mate. She's the first woman on a national ticket, congresswoman from Queens, has a weird record on a bunch of things. There is a press conference to introduce her. Gregory Fossidal, then an editorial writer at the Wall Street Journal, is present at the press conference and asks her a hostile question. And the press corps boos him. The press corps booed someone asking a question of Geraldine Ferraro. Now, I don't think booing is going to, although we were just 2 days ago, President of the United States, before a room of journalists in Chicago, was heckled and booed by the journalists. But of course, that doesn't count because they're black. And so they get to heckle and boo because they're black journalists and he's being disrespectful to a black journalist by saying you're being mean to me. And then that throws everything off. But we do have precedent for the press corps essentially, doing the thing where in the Producers, where the one guy starts applauding at the end of this Springtime for Hitler number and the other people in the audience beat him up, or Greg Fossidal getting booed. That's a thing that did happen.
Or a few years ago, didn't somebody in the press room ask a question that was not well received by the rest of the press, and somebody in the press room wrote a note and left it on their desk that said, "Was this helpful?" or something like that. Was
really?
that question helpful? Something like it was a very modern Mean Girls take on what you're describing in 1984, but it was something like that.
Kelly O'Donnell will pipe up and say that's not appropriate.
Yeah, if this were a Republican administration, not to do this all the time, by now, the White House Press Association, maybe not the White House, I don't know who, would have written a collective letter to the candidate and said, we the undersigned are deeply concerned at the fact that you have not called a press conference. It's been 17 days and there has been no press conference. This violates all the traditions of America's vaunted support for free speech and a free press. And we demand that you have a press conference immediately. You know that would happen, and 250 people would sign that letter, and MSNBC would be 24 hours a day about why she's not giving a press conference, and that's not happening, and it's not going to happen. So even talking about it happening is a silly thing.
But it's worse than that. It is the standard protection of a Democratic administration by the press, but it's also what Noah alluded to Charles saying, and I've said before. The media knows they failed to protect the Biden story, to protect Biden's weakness and his disorientation. They are not going to follow that up right away by failing to protect Kamala from the public seeing that she cannot put more than 3 extemporaneous sentences together without the sentences being essentially identical with words switched around.
Okay, maybe we're complaining about the wrong thing. We're having a substantive conversation, and now we've descended into into complaining about the press. Yeah. But we actually legitimately don't know how she will respond to anything, in part because she's not talking about it. So I don't know what she'll do in the case of an Iranian strike. At least I knew that Joe Biden said, ridiculously as it turned out, but twice in his presidency, in response to a possible coming crisis, he said to Russia, don't go into Ukraine. And he said to Hezbollah, don't fire on Israel, right? I mean, he did say don't. Like, there was a policy which was don't. Now, in one case, Hezbollah actually did, because there were 2 American aircraft carriers right off the shore, didn't, mostly, for the most part, after like the 10th of October. And Russia did. But don't was the policy.
And the policy has changed now.
Right.
But what is as of last night on the tarmac?
Yeah.
It was don't. Yeah. It is now stop.
Yeah.
Joe Biden was asked, what's your message for Vladimir Putin last night on the tarmac? And his one-word answer was stop.
Yeah. You know, this is succinctness. Joe Biden, famous throughout his career for succinctness.
Yeah, he doesn't talk a lot.
But the code-wise taken by the enemy, it's now the message is don't stop.
Yeah, don't say right.
Well, look, I mean, there's a story in
Don't Stop.
Time
that is good.
I think it was Simon Schuster has this story of what happened.
Hold on, I gotta stop and pay Abe credit, because he just did something very witty, and I was in my own head, and I need to salute the message being don't stop. That is a perfect summation of the Biden foreign policy. In the end, it's don't stop.
Right.
Okay.
So there's the story about Kamala Harris going to, I think it was Munich, right before, about a week before Russia invaded, and the Biden administration knew that Russia was going to invade. And she says to Zelensky, she was sent there as, to talk to Zelensky. She says to Zelensky, look, the Russians are coming. And Zelensky says to her, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, we live, like, I can see him. Like, what do you think I don't know about?
I can see Russia from my house.
Yeah, literally. Like, so what? So, Putin and I are on the same Wi-Fi network. Tell me something I don't know. And so he says, well, so what are you going to do about it? Will you sanction them? And she says, no, we're not doing preemptive sanctions. We can't do preemptive sanctions on Russia just because we think we know what we know about what they're going to do. And Zelensky was pretty upset with it. Whatever. Anyway, the administration's solution was to have Kamala speak at that conference and say, here's what we know. Russia's massing its troops. The Russians are coming. This is all that. That way, everybody can watch Putin do what he's not supposed to do, as if that's going to shame him. And the frustration there from Zelensky was, we know the future and we're not willing to do something until it happens. What is the purpose of knowing the future?
Okay,
and so
let's
that's
have
the question in all these different conflict areas.
Let's have a flashback to Noah on the Commentary Magazine podcast, not on tape, because I'm not sophisticated enough to have that kind of stuff ready to hand. But in the week before the invasion, when all we were talking about was the invasion, Noah and I and Abe had this constant colloquy, which is, what does it mean that Biden is saying Putin's going to go in? He's going. He's going in. It's coming. Here he comes. Here, oh boy, don't think he's not coming. What was it that he was doing? And we spent 5-6 hours that week trying to make sense out of what the hell they thought they were doing. The only thing I think we came up with was he's trying to make it clear to Putin that we have his conversations monitored, that we know what he's saying. We know what's going on in the councils of state and in the planning process, and we have eyes on him, and we're watching, and we know, and maybe this will unnerve him and he'll try to screw up his high command because he thinks somebody is leaking or something like that. But that was 2.5 years, not quite 2.5 years ago, but close to 2.5 years ago. And here we are again, and it's Biden with Harris and all that. And we legitimately, genuinely have no idea how they would respond, despite Lloyd Austin saying that they will help Israel in some fashion, how they will respond to Iran provoking.
Well, we don't know how Kamala Harris would respond. She has said she's going to clear out the national security staff. She said Austin's gone.
But that's in 6 months. I'm talking about in 6 days.
Yeah,
in 6 days or 5 days or whatever, if Iran does respond in that kind of time frame, we have literally no idea how she is going to respond. And I think
here's the other side of that coin, because I would be very remiss if my only opportunity to rejoin this podcast after listening to it for so many hours on my lawnmower, and I didn't say what I am constantly assaulted by in my head, which is that the other guy stinks at this.
We can get to that.
So bad.
Yeah.
And I really want to say that for the benefit of everybody listening, Kamala Harris has the opportunity now to say, don't change horses in midstream. She can make that argument in ways that Joe Biden could not in the event of a real crisis. Yeah. And a real sobering, bloody event in the Middle East would stop the parochial domestic nonsense that we've been privy to for the last month. Not nonsense necessarily, because some of it was very sobering and serious, especially the attempt on Donald Trump's life. Nevertheless, we've been very inwardly focused, and that would expand our horizon broadly. And it would put a lot of focus on Donald Trump's approach to the Middle East, some of it very beneficial for him, if we have a full retrospective on his approach to Middle East policy in terms of actually engaging in conflict, which he really can only just lean into the Soleimani strike, because the run-up to the Soleimani strike wasn't all that great. An American died in the process of him trying to avoid that conflict. Nevertheless, I don't think his record is such, nor is his affect or even interests inclined towards the projection of American power in the defense of its allies. He's just not that guy. And
no, but he enjoys targeted assassinations when bad people blow up. And so he's not the guy who's going to stand on the tarmac and go, I don't know how helpful this is. That's basically.
But that phase would be over in the event of an actual.
Yeah. I do want to say, by the way, in terms of don't change horses in midstream, just our slate in high school and our school government, I was vice president of the student council, and we ran for re-election on the literal phrase, don't change horses midstream. We thought it would be funny if we say that out loud, and that was our actual slogan, and we won. So it does work. I mean, Kamala can say literally, I won an election like that. It's possible she can. But I think that the thing with Trump is that people just have this picture in their minds of a guy who likes to fight and a guy who doesn't back down easily from fights and all that stuff. And so he gets coded in the American mind as tough guy. And that's just however frustrating that can be, because there's plenty of times he's not much of a tough guy,
right.
but that's the sort of thing. That's how people on the right were very frustrated with how Joe Biden was coded as this sort of goofy, well-meaning Uncle Joe, when they were like, no, he's really a jerk and whatever. Yeah. This is so Trump benefits from what we would call branding, and I don't know what.
I don't know if I don't know. I in both of these cases, I think Trump's default, and this is his weakness, and we're seeing it play out over the last couple of weeks, is he came up with this ready phrase to deal with all of the problems of the Biden administration, which is like, if I had been president, none of this would have happened, right? That's his. There wouldn't have been a war in Ukraine. Hamas wouldn't have hit Israel. None of this would have happened. And it's not bad as like an opening. But when things happen, you still have to say what you would do and what she's doing that's wrong, and that what you would do was right. By saying, I wouldn't happen under my watch, it's like, okay, well, your watch is over. Tell us why in January 2025, we give you the watch again, and you're on the wall, how you're going to keep the wildlings from coming over the wall.
Like your 1968 metaphor, he's taken the Nixon approach when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, where he's planned to end the war on day one, but I got to keep it under my hat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But in this case, that's an ongoing conflict that can't be resolved. And this is going to be a move, if the Iranians make it, that alters the trajectory of what's been going on over the last year or the last 9-10 months in a way that is profoundly destabilizing.
I mean, in a direct Israel-Iran war, you got to think that Lebanon's the battlefield, but so is Iraq, right? Iraq is the Germany. The Germany of this conflict, and the United States has troops everywhere in Israel or in Iraq.
We did a targeted assassination in Iraq on Tuesday night. I mean, we had special forces do stuff in Iraq Tuesday night that almost made it look as though it was coordinated with the Israeli strike on Hania, which clearly it was not. But Israel, went after the Hezbollah commander and the Hamas commander in 12 hours, and we were active in Iraq going after somebody who was doing something. I'm not quite sure what he was doing. I assume it was probably related to the Houthis or something, or a threat against Americans in Iraq. I'm not quite clear, but we are on the battlefield. It's a slightly
the missiles, the drones that killed 3 American troops in Jordan came from Iraq.
Right. And so maybe
we're engaged with that now, and in the sights of these groups in Iraq as well.
Right. Okay. So the point here is that Kamala, it's a time of testing for Kamala. It's not a time of testing for Trump exactly, because Trump as the member, not the member of the administration, has a free hand in a weird way to criticize what is done if it's done badly, and he will suffer the consequences if it's done well, if whatever we do is done well. But I don't know that this is where I'm getting back to my point earlier, which is I don't know that we know how they will define, meaning the Biden-Harris Democrat liberal media axis, how they will define what it means to have done well in response to the terrible thing that might or might not happen. Now, obviously, if they join in an effort to slap down an Iranian assault on Israeli civilians, and that is effective as it was in April, then they'll take a victory lap, and everyone will have to say this was good. And you could say, well, it's not them really, it's our military is so fantastic, or we're so good at this, or whatever. But I mean, if Trump gets churlish on that, that's actually going to backfire on him. But I don't know that they're going to define it that way. Their definition is, what's really great about what happened here on the tarmac with Evan Gershkovich and everybody is no guns were fired. Nothing happened. It was all diplomacy. It's just great. It's all diplomacy. Can we take a second, by the way, to talk about the Detsov family? This unbelievable story that is literally a duplication of the FX TV show The Americans. Traded for these Slovenians. These two kids are put on a plane. They're like 6 and 5 or something like that. They're the children of these sleeper agents in Slovenia whose parents told them that they were from Argentina and only spoke Spanish to them. And only on the plane back to Moscow did they discover that they were, in fact, the children of Russian sleeper agents and were not Argentinian, but were, in fact, Russian. This is a real thing that just happened.
Putin greeted the kids in Spanish.
Talk about
the airport
lottery.
Vladimir Putin introduced himself in Spanish to the kids.
This is the craziest. Like, that is, there are. I mean, that is beyond all belief. Yeah.
I think there's a lot more of it than people realize. And it's a good indication of how the Kremlin thinks about this stuff and how deep they go, how long they take to plan.
Unless they got the idea from the Americans. That's the other.
They
what if they got the idea from the Americans? I know I'm joking.
Careers to the stuff. I mean,
the greatest thing about that happened with the Americans was that when I last was at Commentary, we got a note from the producers of the show asking permission to have a copy of Commentary magazine on Air Force One.
That's right, because it was Reagan era, right?
Because it was Reagan era, and it was So life.
We're like, are you kidding? Of course. Here's 500 copies of it. Paper Air Force One.
And they said in the note, they said, we promise we're not doing this we won't say anything bad about Commentary.
Yeah.
Like that's not a hit job or something.
Take that, human events.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, all right. So let's talk Veep, and then we can go. We had two Veep talk about, the coming Veep and the current Veep. The coming Veep candidate and the current Veep candidate. I'm going out on a limb. Noah said that that Biden won't survive his term, or not that he'll die, but that he won't be president come January 20th, 2025. You said you're not staking your reputation on it. I wrote a whole book about how Rudy Giuliani was the only person who could beat Hillary Clinton, the next president candidate of the United States. I wrote a whole book about it, and I'm here to tell the tale. Granted, I haven't written a book since. It's been 19 years. But anyway, such is life. Okay, so you're not staking. Your reputation would be fine. But I am now going to join you on the high diving board and say Trump is going to get rid of J.D. Vance. And the reason I say Trump is going to get rid of J.D. Vance is that our friend Harry Enton has a good tweet out. He did a little segment on it, on the thing. Vance came out of the convention with a favorability rating of -6. Only time in American history that somebody came out of a convention with a negative approval rating, including Dan Quayle, who supposedly was such a disastrous pick. And he's now at -15. And why would Trump keep him? We already have an example of a switcheroo, big switcheroo on their part. Why can't he do a switcheroo? He made a bad choice. Time to tell J.D. Vance to stand down for the good of the party. And who he picks, I don't know.
So I'm the other side of this one. I'm going to peel back our very private conversations and say, I don't know what mechanism exists to do that. He is the nominated vice president of the party. He would have to resign personally. So they'd have to pull a Biden on him and, make him an offer he can't refuse. And I just don't foresee that offer coming because Donald Trump is very deferential to the MAGA movement. He defines the MAGA movement as he wants to, but his acolytes do lead him in directions that he would otherwise be disinclined to go to. And he would fracture his faction of the party by doing that, sap them of enthusiasm, which is something he desperately needs at this stage of the race.
I don't think they like him.
I don't see the upside. The upside is to appeal to the moderate squishies who they hate. It seems
the upside is
I'll tell you what I say.
The upside is he's going to lose the election. Vance is a drag.
So how can he explain that? How can he admit that?
He's going to say, I'm going to lose the election and Vance is a drag. He's going to say,
he's going to ask.
Okay.
JD Vance is going to say, he's going to have JD Vance make us say, I am clearly a distraction. And I shouldn't be a distraction.
Right.
That's the play. Everybody's talking about me. This is a distraction.
There's another way that he could talk about it, that Trump could talk about it. He could say, unlike the Democrats who have a clear problem in plain sight that they hide for months and months and months and deny and take to the brink of the edge, we saw a problem early, excuse me, on the ticket, and we took care of it.
We fixed it. Look, so in 1972, Thomas Eagleton was the nominated vice presidential candidate of the Democratic Party for 18 days. And then somebody found out that he'd been to a psychiatrist, and that was the end of Thomas Eagleton. Like, sure. Granted, that was 52 years ago, but he was and he did resign.
Okay.
By the way, I'm not saying he's going to do it. I'm just saying that's the way.
You're right that he's got a practiced line down to demonstrate that he has faith in his nominee. He deployed it at that National Association of Black Journalists events, which he bombed and was terrible at, just to make that clear. But he also doesn't have any faith in his own argument, because you can hear Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita in his head when he says, well, nobody's voting for the vice president. They're voting for me. You're voting for me. Nobody really cares about him. So they're obviously talking him out of whatever his instincts are. I think you're right. His instincts are probably like, this guy stinks. I shouldn't have let Don Jr. talk me into this nonsense. But the people around him are telling him that that's a bad idea. And so
do we know that?
To the people around him.
How do we know that?
I'm guessing. I'm assuming that when he says, listen, historically,
I thought
they don't,
it's
not him poring over the political almanacs of the last couple of decades. It's somebody in his ear.
I thought he read a column and then he repeated what he read, because that's what everybody's been saying in the press. And on the podcast, we've all been saying, well, it doesn't really matter. Maybe LBJ, helped JFK. And there was Donald Trump at this forum going, well, it never really matters. Well, maybe LBJ, maybe it mattered for political reasons or whatever. It sounds to me like he's just regurgitating. He's reading his own press and he's regurgitating it. And I would say that, the point that I made last night was the effect is not solely what effect JD Vance has on the numbers. It's the effect that JD Vance has on Donald Trump. And Trump looks like he's in a rut. And he's clearly uncomfortable having to answer questions about his vice presidential nominee, which he should be uncomfortable doing, because the whole point of the do no harm process is the vice president may have to answer all sorts of questions. Hey, didn't you call Donald Trump a dummy stupid head in 2016? But the president is not supposed to have to clean up for the vice president. And Trump is not good at cleaning up for anybody. And so he sits there and he goes, well, probably doesn't matter. He's trying to tell people, just stop talking about it. And that's what's not going to do it. So I think it's sapping something out of Trump to have to be in this situation. And I think he's less of a candidate when he has to be grumpy, cleaning up, it's like cleaning up his kids' messes or something like that.
There's a Shakespearean reversal in Donald Trump having to clean up after this undisciplined Republican who just keeps making messes.
Where I disagree with you is I don't think Vance has any independent standing outside of the Claremont Review of Books and your dear friend and my friend Michael Brenda Doherty. He does not have a constituency. Trump is the constituency. And if Trump says, I got to do this because I got to win and I got to beat this rigged media political situation, and, I'm using all the tools to hand and we're going to do it. And here is my nominee Nick Fuentes. Here's my nominee Glenn Youngkin. Here's my nominee Doug Burgum. Here's my nominee whatever. Here is Nikki Haley. I don't care who it is. I'm picking Nikki Haley because she's an actual Indian. I don't know what he'll say. But can he do it? Yes. Should he do it? Probably. I mean, look, Vance is 15 points underwater. Like, I'm not saying that people vote on the vice president, but if anyone is ever going to vote on a vice president, it's going to be Vance, and it's not going to be to his advantage. So
look, the Democrats could just say, look, Trump is term limited. He's already served one term. He's serving 4 years. at the most, and that's it. So they can make the argument that really what he's doing now is picking the successor. Because
Right.
this is
The
lame
Democratic
duck. This is a
argument-
lame duck term.
The Democratic argument doesn't even matter here. The question is Trump looking at what's happening and the trajectory of what's happening? And let's be fair, he is not yet behind. Like, only in the 538 average, which is weighted in order to have G. Elliott Morris appointed as political director in the Harris White House, as far as I can tell, or something like that. Only in the mysterious weighting of 538, no longer under the control of Nate Silver, is Harris ahead. In all the other poll averages, she is slightly behind, and Trump is still like a point or a little less than a point ahead. But I don't think that's going to be the case come Monday or Tuesday. I assume the polling is going to flip.
She's going to get a bounce from the VP on Tuesday, right? We all expect there to be some sort of...
Or she'll get a bounce from the VP on Sunday when it leaks or whatever. I don't even know. She'll get a bounce. She's doing well. She has this cordon of support. There's no reason to think that it's going to reverse itself. They have enthusiasm. The enthusiasm gap between Republicans and Democrats has been closed. Response bias in polling has been ended, meaning that the classic thing was Biden might have been doing worse, particularly in the swing states, because people who wanted him were so depressed they wouldn't answer the phone when the pollsters called. And now they're happy to answer the phone, meaning Biden probably would have done better in November than he was showing in some of those battleground polls. But now Harris is showing the flag fine and all of that. And when he gets behind, he can stand there and say, I was behind in 2016, but I won anyway. That's all well and good. But, he
didn't start way ahead. And that's the
or I don't even think he was. Yeah, he wasn't.
You blew a lead. You've never had the.
If he just looks like he's already starting to look like the pressure is getting to him.
Right.
And the pressure is getting to the team. And especially in the event of some kind of an actual sobering scenario abroad, that doesn't bode well for your ticket. You're just throwing people off the team left and right, flailing.
I know he did it. Okay. But look, it's funny because Maggie Haberman, who knows him well, my old friend Maggie Haberman from the New York Post, now at the New York Times, said Trump doesn't like, she used to say Trump doesn't like confrontation. She doesn't like conference. He doesn't like confrontation. Then he fired 890 people in 3 minutes. Like, he fires people. He fired his 2 national security advisors, 3 national security advisors, 3 chiefs of staff. I don't know how many press people, aside from Scaramucci, he fired. He loves to fire people. He fires people at the drop of a hat. He'll fire J.D. Vance.
Pre-fired Scaramucci.
He pre-fired him?
He was right. He was negative 12 days or something.
It was 11 days.
His official starting date was 11 days away.
Oh, really? Okay. Anyway, he fired Ben. He fired Kelly. He fired. He fired. Who else? He didn't fire Meadows. Who did he fire? He fired. He was firing people.
Right. So that's the response to Bolton, the argument
Rex
made by
Tillerson.
Right. So that's the response made by to the point made by Ed Kilgore, which is Trump won't do this because he doesn't like to admit mistakes. And that's the response to it, which is that I agree that he doesn't.
His mistake.
Right. Exactly.
He'll say
he's done what he's been doing all along. He's been firing people without taking blame.
Vance was great, and then he stepped on the platform, and I'm sorry, but everybody saw he got really bad press clips.
And he'll say he was treated unfairly.
Press coverage was terrible. No, if he says he's treated unfairly, then he can't necessarily fire him. He'll say, no, I don't know.
Well, I think he can.
Okay, he can say whatever.
Either way, he can say whatever. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, look, he should fire him. He's terrible. He's terrible at this. I'm sorry. Look, I would be perfectly willing to admit that Vance was doing a good job and that the press was being mean. I don't like Vance. I don't like his policies and all that. But I think I'm fair enough to be. This is the worst major political rollout I didn't think I would see a worse political rollout than Dan Quayle's first week. I mean, this takes this to a whole new level. Maybe Clinton's first month as president, which was an incredible disaster. People don't even remember. That was really bad. That was we don't like you're in a uniform. We're Democrats. We don't like you, said somebody in the White House to Colin Powell, or something like that. things every day. Something horrible happened in the first month of the Clinton administration, but it was the first month, and he had a long way to go. And there's only 3 months till the election. So I am out on the limb. He is going to replace Vance. I don't know when. I don't know with whom. All I know is Chris LaCivita is giving the finger in his that's his campaign manager, showing a picture of Tony Soprano giving the finger to people because MAGA was yelling at him on Twitter. MAGA idiots were yelling at him on Twitter saying it was his fault that Trump was doing badly. And so if you're Chris LaCivita and you look at that, do you then say, yeah, you know what, I'm really worried about you? It's like, get rid of this. We got to do something, and we got to make a change. Unless they believe it's a sugar high, it'll all calm down by September. Trump is not usually the sort of person for whom counsels of patience and the idea that this is all going to reset after Labor Day, the Olympics will be over, and people will really batten down and focus. Really? That's Trump? Okay, let's talk about the Democratic Veep. I got a text from a good friend of mine, very serious political guy, says, Kamala's in a box. If she doesn't pick Josh Shapiro, then a credible argument can be made that she didn't pick him because he was Jewish, and then she's on the defensive and can't. And so, but we're hearing that it's between him and Tim Walz of Minnesota. So she has to pick him or be labeled an anti-Semite. I don't know.
This is the point I made you made that days ago, which is that, though it's probably unfair because lots of considerations go into this stuff, and JB Pritzker is also Jewish and whatever, it will be perceived that way because that's the way the pro-Palestinian base, the progressives, want it to be perceived. They want to, they want to heighten this to the point where you're either doing what we want or you're doing it because you don't want to do what we want. But either way, it's about us. And so the Palestine issue becomes, they have elevated it to, you're doing this because of the Palestine issue. One way or the other, they want it to be a litmus test on her. They've sort of done this to her. But the good news is that they've put her in a box. It's a very pleasant place to be because that box is with Josh Shapiro, and Josh Shapiro is if you built a vice presidential nominee in a lab underground, you would probably build a popular governor of Pennsylvania. So
I got another good one. I got another good one for you, which is that the one thing that came up yesterday, and for some crazy reason, the Daily Beast, which is not a good publication.
No. You got to dwell on that one. That piece was very illustrative of the forces moving in the background.
But I was just going to say that the tweet, not even the piece, but the tweet said, Josh Shapiro can no longer be considered the front runner for the Veep nomination because of a scandal. Click here and read about our scandal.
Right. This is. You don't have to be long in the business to see where that comes from. So this was a giant oppo dump. The fun thing about the truncated schedule now that Democrats have to navigate is that you can't do the drip, not enough time. You got to just drop everything all at once. So they drop this hush money payment, just a go away money payment that they made to somebody who is alleging sexual harassment in Shapiro's office. And along with that, he also appeared at the floor of a 76ers game with some donors. You never know, might have been some quid pro quo there. And also, which is the dead giveaway, no foreign policy chops, because he's a state level executive and doesn't have to do foreign policy. Where does that come from? The Hill. Obviously comes from the Hill. Who are Shapiro's enemies on the Hill? Progressives. The progressives, and then there has some fun words in there, nice words about Tim Walz, who they think is the most progressive alternative to this. This is why the Shapiro pick is a no-brainer. It does all the work for you. It is a sister soldiering moment because these people are so overrepresented in media. Right. And so sensitive to the concerns of some of the most odious people in America that they do all the work for you. Oh, the Shapiro pick means she's backing away from all the progressive policy positions she struck in 2019. Oh, I guess she's against the anti-genocide protesters. Oh, this, oh, that, oh, that. They don't have to say one word. Right. His mere existence makes the argument for them.
Let's make point two, because what was it that they said made him no longer the front runner? Was the $350,000 settlement to settle the sexual harassment case in his office. What is the one issue, do you think, that the Trump-Vance team cannot really prosecute well as an attack on the Democratic team? What would that be? sexual predation, having been found in a New York courtroom to have effectively to have raped E. Jean Carroll, Trump really and Vance will really want to have a conversation about a sexual harassment suit with an NDA. Stormy Daniels, like, I'm sorry, that's also they don't
Also,
have a leg to
his
stand on.
accusation is not that he costed someone.
I know. Anyway, they can't make the case. Maybe Trump's fans on the internet can make the case, and good luck to them, to Greg Price and Laura Loomer and whoever. Laura Loomer, by the way, releasing a birth certificate of Kamala Harris saying, I think she was saying that she's not black because her father is listed as Jamaican on the birth certificate, because Laura Loomer, I don't even know why we know who Laura Loomer is, but I think Trump likes Laura anyway, who is clearly either a mental patient or mentally deficient. Like, who do you think people from Jamaica are? Like, are they, from Northumberland? I mean, what the hell is going on there?
Hasn't Laura Loomer seen Cool Runnings?
I mean, I've seen a picture of Kamala Harris's father, and it's pretty unmistakable.
Who's alive?
That he's alive.
And well,
he's alive.
And can speak for himself.
And apparently she does not have much of a relationship with, although I'm told by our friends at the radical left-wing, right-wing, centrist, Catholic, Marxist, Slavoj Zizek publication Compact that makes more sense than Kamala Harris speaking a sentence, that Donald Harris, her father, while being a Marxist, is actually far more culturally conservative than she is, which is interesting to know. I don't know what that means. I don't know how you have Marxist cultural conservatism. But, if you're looking for fusionism, Compact is the place to go. Anyway, so maybe that could help her too. It's like, well, my father is a cultural conservative and a Marxist. So if you don't like his Marxism, maybe you'll like his cultural conservatism. Noah, give us a sense, if you will, of we got the Veep nomination next week, and then we're going to have the Democratic convention the week after.
17th, I think, something like that.
It starts on the 17th. Starts on the.
It's super late.
Okay, it's super late. Okay,
so Saturday. That's not right. 19th.
Right. So
maybe?
Yeah. Okay.
It's late. Whatever.
So Kamala Harris has raised $310 million in a month. Money is not inexhaustible. It's hard money. That's not soft money. That means that every cent of that comes with a maximum gift of $5,200. I believe is now the top hard money gift. So she has Democratic enthusiasm, like that. That's what I said. Like it's the idea that there will be any gap. If anything, Republicans are going to have to worry about enthusiasm now, because they've been dealt this reeling gut blow from losing the race that they thought, not losing, but like losing the victory that they thought they had in hand without question just 2 weeks ago, during the convention. So they're going to go on a bus trip. She's got to do something. They got to keep feeding the news story, because the news story is she's great, she's fun, she's a cook, she's raising money, she's enthusiasm, all of that. But you can't just. You're going to have to like add little bits and pieces of detail, right?
Absolutely, because this is why the border story broke through, and the Hunter Biden story broke through, and the age story broke through, is that in part the media is retailing narratives that conflict with the evidence of your own eyes. But the other part is that events keep occurring that they don't answer, right? And it's a monopoly on the analysis of, and even noticing the events that perpetuate the story that they're trying to bury. And if Harris and Shapiro are out there delivering the same stump speech day after day, then it's a media vacuum. It's a news vacuum. And Republicans can and will fill it. Because they'll be harping on the unfairness of the press, not calling for her to have interviews or press conferences or any of the stuff that she should have had already. But B, they will be filling the vacuum with the archives of Kamala Harris's maladroit comments, nonsensical statements, sing-songy approaches. Right now, by the way, the Trump campaign has been really underwhelming in this regard. They put out obviously they put out this one ad that was like making fun of Kamala Harris for dancing, which she's eminently make funnable of, but nevertheless, it's not substantive. And then, the left gets their hackles up, but it's just totally not substantive. And just in the same way that they're going after her inauthenticity by going after her race, which is probably the only thing she's ever been consistent about in her entire career. They have opportunities there to make the case. And I suspect there are competent people running this campaign, and I suspect they will. And the very fact that she doesn't have a convincing conversion narrative about all these positions that she suddenly dropped is what's going to move the needle. That is going to be the new story. Whatever her stump speech isn't going to be new. So if Republicans are competent and capable of creating new narratives, and they are, then I do suspect that the onus will be on media to say, well, Republicans are raising all these questions and you're not answering them. And eventually the guild mentality, the instinct to protect the institution and therefore their livelihoods would kick in, you would expect.
Abe disagrees with that.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't to bring back Noah's often invoked concept of the incentive structure. I don't see it. What the press see as their job, and therefore what they think they need to do to protect it, is to keep their readers reliant on them for the good things about the people they like and the bad things about the people they hate, especially now. This is like go time. There's not time to even play around to veer off message for a second. So they are more focused on protecting her.
I will guarantee. I mean, you're right, and I'm not. I don't have firm convictions on this, but I will guarantee you that between now and Election Day, she will say some sing-songy nonsense about, whatever the ethereal majesty of the universe. And it will only be Republicans and social media talking about it to a degree that creates a narrative that catches on in pop culture among comics, not late night comics, stand-ups following, yeah. In the counterculture. And the press will try to ignore it. And then that catches on, and then we get to 3 or 4 weeks before Election Day, and it's already caught on, and then the press has to kick in with that. Oh, we just didn't see this.
But if we were in a circumstance where there were more time, that's how it happens. I don't think there's enough time for it to go through those phases.
I mean, you're both right in that it could happen, but you don't bet on the come in politics. You can't bet on a thing that you don't know that's going to happen, that's going to change the dynamic. And I can just report that in 2015, late 2015, early 2016, the general thought among people who watched Republican politics is Trump is going to do something that is going to knock him out. It's not serious. He's just going to do something that's going to knock him out. And then we watched as he did thing after thing after thing after thing that didn't knock him out. And then he won, right? He said McCain, he didn't like people who were captured. And he said this and he said that and he said the other thing. This is even before he talked about the judge and the Gold Star parents and the, and the Access Hollywood tape in the I myself said it. It's like, he's got an appointment, and so he's gonna hit a wall. Something's gonna happen, and then that's gonna be it. And you know what? It never happened. So he said things, and it didn't work, and it didn't happen. So we have recent evidence of that not working. Waiting for the other person to stumble is not a great strategy for victory. And to me, the ultimate problem for Trump is that when this was an election between an 81-year-old guy and a 78-year-old guy, it was an election about who was less bad. And Trump was winning the who was less bad vote. But Republicans liked him, But the vote in the middle was, oh my God, Biden is worse, right? So the 10% of people in the middle who are going to decide the election were like, Biden is worse. Probably we're going to have to vote for Trump. He's got to make the case that she's worse than he is, basically, or the case has to be made. But here's the problem. She's not 81. She's 59. And therefore, this is now a race about the future versus the past. Shouldn't be. There's no reason for it to be. But she can be just like Bill Clinton and start singing Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow, or what. She's got that Beyonce Freedom song. I don't know, whatever song that, Chapel Rowan is playing, or, the Boy Genius, or whatever young people like these days. I'm now naming bands that my kids like, or singers my kids like, that you probably have never heard of. But she is now the young candidate in the race. She is the person who is new or newer than the old guy. And this is a change election, and it was going to be Trump was the change, even though he was also an incumbent, and that was going to give him a double advantage. And if it's a change election, she's the change candidate, and she's also literally 18 years younger than he is, and he is old. And when I watched him in Pennsylvania at this rally the other night, he seemed like an old man at the table at the Villages telling stories, and everyone's eyes are starting to roll because it's really time for him to have the prune whip and then go and watch Wheel of Fortune.
Here's the question: does he debate?
Well, if he doesn't debate, then it's over anyway. Like that's just.
I thought it was a no-brainer. He's obviously debating, but then he's really hemming and hawing about it more than I thought he would.
It's weird. Well, that's weird. I mean, if he doesn't project an air of confidence, like, then there's really all he has is air. All Trump is a vibe. We keep talking about the vibe shift. Trump is a vibe. Trump's not a policy. Trump's not an approach. I mean, Trump's vibe is strength, right? Trump's vibe is fight. Trump's vibe is whatever. If he's not going to fight or show strength or whatever, and then also, be unafraid. And the one thing I'll say about the terrible appearance at the National Association of Black Journalists is he is willing to go into the belly of the beast in a way that a lot of politicians aren't. He may not have acquitted himself well, and it may have been a tactical mistake, but he sat there without an ounce of fear of them. Maybe he should have had it. Maybe it would have been prudent if he had been more calculated and careful. But he has that advantage that why he's not saying I'll debate her every week. Like, she's the chicken. I'm happy to, have a debate on every single. So let's have a debate on inflation. Let's have a debate on crime. Let's have a debate on campuses. Let's have a debate on trans. Let's have a debate on foreign policy. Let's have a debate on Russia. Let's have a debate on China. Let's have a debate on tariffs. Let's have a debate on the border. Like, it's like, if he
I still think he will, but it's weird because he's doing the why should I? He enjoys the will he won't he dynamic, and that's kind of the showmanship of it. So I won't put too much stock into it. But then I forget who he was interviewed by. It was a friendly interview recently, and he's like, "Why should I debate everybody?" Yes, that was. It was like, "Why do I debate? Everybody knows who I am. Why do I have to debate?"
Well, he doesn't. He also doesn't have to win. So he could also lose. He's gonna have a very nice life. He doesn't have to be doing this. He could have a very nice life. Such a nice life he could have had, but he's doing it for you. He's doing it for you. Well, he's losing now.
Well, it looks like he's starting to resent me for doing it for me.
Yeah, I know. Well, you deserve the resentment, Seth, because you handed Kamala Harris her campaign slogan, "Don't change horses in midstream." You've proven it works. You showed in that 11th grade election. And, now when she uses it and she wins, Seth Mandel is really the villain of the piece, is all I can say. So
I have to make my Twitter mentions private or something like that.
Something like that. Very wise. Okay. Well, Noah Rothman, it's such a joy to have you back with us. We will, of course, have you again. You did us a huge solid here because you came on literally with 15 seconds notice, because of a scheduling or logistical problem that we had. I did this for Jonah Goldberg, by the way, yesterday. That was one of the reasons that I was open to it. Jonah contacted me and said, "Oh my God, my guest just dropped out. Can you join?" And I said, "Sure." And then in 5 minutes we did a podcast together, and so, but I was really thrilled that you answered the phone and that you weren't on your lawnmower. You could have been on your lawnmower at that moment.
Out mere hours from now, I will be, but I don't have anything to listen to because I already listened to the impromptu Remnant podcast and yesterday's commentary.
Oh boy.
I'm out.
You're in trouble.
You'll listen to some, what was it, Chapel Roan?
Chapel Rowan, very popular. Chapel Rowan opened for Taylor Swift and is now she's now like an up and coming. If she spends 13 years at the top of the chart, she'll end up being Taylor Swift. Anyway, so yes, listen to Chapel Rowan. That's what commentary recommends, is listen to Chapel Rowan so you know what 18-year-olds are listening to. We'll be back on Monday. Thanks again to Noah, and for Abe and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.